That morning, no one expected a single act of defiance to change military history. What began as routine training became a moment every soldier on base would remember, and one that would test the difference between following orders and doing what's right. The Aldershot training ground stretched under a slate-grey sky, the kind that hung low over Hampshire like a pending reprimand. At 0600 hours, the parade square echoed with the sharp cadence of boots striking gravel. Private Elena Vasquez stood at attention in the front rank of her platoon, her camouflage uniform crisp despite the damp chill seeping through the fabric. She was 22, fresh from basic at Purbright, her dark hair pulled tight under her beret, eyes fixed on the horizon where the barracks loomed like silent sentinels. Sergeant Major Harlan barked orders from the dais, his voice cutting through the mist like a bayonet. "Platoon, attention!" The snap of heels was immediate, a collective exhale held in check. Harlan was a fixture here, broad-shouldered and weathered, his campaign ribbons glinting faintly in the weak light. This was the 3rd Battalion Parachute Regiment, elite paratroopers, though Elena's unit was still green, proving themselves in the shadow of the real operators. The air smelled of wet earth and machine oil, the distant thump of a Chinook warming up on the helipad, adding a low rumble to the morning ritual. Elena had joined up to escape the narrow streets of her hometown in Manchester, where options felt as confined as the terraced houses. Her father, a former Royal Logistic Corps driver, had drilled discipline into her since she could walk. "The uniform doesn't bend for anyone," he'd say, polishing his old boots by the fire. Now, in the ranks, she felt that truth in her bones, the weight of the pack on her shoulders during forced marches, the burn of rifle drills until her hands blistered. But it was the camaraderie she craved, the unspoken pact that bound them tighter than blood. To her left stood Lance Corporal Rhys Davies, a wiry Welshman with a perpetual smirk, and beside him, Corporal Finn Riley, whose laugh could fill a mess hall. They were her section mates, veterans of a tour in Helmand that Elena had only heard in hushed stories over ration packs. The platoon numbered 30, a mix of fresh faces and hardened jumps, all under Harlan's unyielding gaze. Routine was their religion. PT at dawn, weapons maintenance till noon, then tactical briefings in the echoing Nissen huts. Today was close-quarters battle drills in the kill house, a concrete maze rigged with simunition rounds, where mistakes meant paint splatters and push-ups. Form up for the range. Harlan's command rippled down the line. They double-timed to the armory, rifles slung, the gravel crunching underfoot. Eleanor's SA-80 felt like an extension of her arm, its polymer stock cool against her palm. She checked the chamber with practiced efficiency, the metallic click a small comfort. In the queue, Rhys leaned in, voice low. "Vasquez, you reckon you'll hit the man-sized target today, or just wing the tea lady again?" She shot him a sidelong glance, keeping her face neutral. "Better than your last grouping, Davies. At least I don't flinch." It was their ritual, the banter that masked the grind, but Riley chuckled too loud, drawing Harlan's eye. "Quiet in the ranks. This ain't a pub crawl." The range was a long berm of earth, targets popping up at random intervals. Eleanor settled into the prone position, cheek welded to the stock, the bipod digging into the mud. The first whistle blew, and she squeezed off rounds, crack, crack, each one a measured breath. Hits registered with dull thuds on the plates. Harlan paced the firing line, stopwatch in hand. "Vasquez, solid, keep that trigger discipline." By Aero 900, sweat beaded under her helmet despite the cold, the acrid tang of cordite hanging heavy. The platoon regrouped for debrief, Harlan dissecting each fault with surgical precision. "Riley, your reload was sloppy. 2 seconds too slow in a real op, and you're done." Finn nodded, jaw tight, no excuses. That was the way here. Errors were owned, corrected, filed away. Eleanor wiped her brow, feeling the quiet pride of a clean run. She was pulling her weight, earning her place. Lunch in the mess was stew and bread, served on metal trays under fluorescent hum. The hall buzzed with low talk, speculation on upcoming jumps, whispers about SAS selections rumored for next month. Elena sat with her section, picking at her food. Rhys nudged her. "Heard you're putting in for selection, Vasquez. Fancy jumping out of perfectly good planes with the big boys?" She shrugged, fork pausing. "Why not, if I can hack it?" It wasn't bravado. She'd trained harder than most. running circuits till her lungs burned, studying tactics by flashlight. But the SAS was another world. Tier 1, the sharp end where paratroopers became legends or ghosts. Finn leaned back, smirking. SAS? You? Come on, love. That's for lads who've forgotten what sleep is. Stick to the airborne, yeah? Don't want you crying on the hills. The table laughed, a ripple that spread to nearby benches. Reese joined in, clapping her shoulder a bit too hard. Try not to cry, Queen. We need you for the easy stuff. Elena's fork stilled, heat rising in her chest. Queen, the nickname they'd pinned on her after a drill where she'd outpaced the lads on the assault course. It started playful, but lately it carried an edge, a reminder she was the only woman in the section. She forced a smile, voice steady. Noted, Corporal, but I'll be the one selecting you lot for tea duty. The laughter faded as Harlan entered, tray in hand, silencing the room with his presence. But the words lingered, a subtle fracture in the chain. Elena finished her meal in silence, the clatter of cutlery masking the resolve hardening inside her. Routine resumed after lunch. More drills, the platoon filing into the kill house. The air inside was stale, concrete walls scarred from years of impacts. Instructors rigged pop-up targets. Hostiles, civilians, the blurred line they trained to navigate. Elena took point for her team, clearing corners with controlled sweeps. Clear left, she called, voice echoing. Reese covered her 6, but as they advanced, a target flipped. A female silhouette, unarmed. Standard protocol, hold fire. But Finn, behind them, squeezed off a round too soon, the simunition bursting yellow on the wall. Contact, he shouted, unnecessary. Harlan's whistle pierced the air from the observation deck. Cease fire, Riley, report. They extracted, faces streaked with sweat. In the hot wash, Harlan's eyes bored into Finn. Civilian down, in training? Explain. Finn shifted, helmet under arm. Thought it was armed, Sarge. Reflex. Reflex gets innocents killed. Harlan's tone was ice. 50 press-ups, now. The platoon watched as Finn dropped, grunting through the set. Eleanor stood silent, but the incident gnawed. Sloppiness born of fatigue, or something deeper. As the afternoon wore on, the mockery from lunch echoed in her mind, mingling with the crack of rounds outside. By dusk, as the platoon stacked arms and dispersed to barracks, Elena lingered on the square. The wind picked up, carrying the faint howl of dogs from the K9 kennels across base. She wasn't crying, not yet, but the defiance stirred, a quiet vow amid the fading light. Tomorrow's drills would test more than aim. They would probe the bonds holding them together, and the ones fraying at the edges. The next dawn broke with the relentless precision of a field clock, the bugle call slicing through the barracks at 500 hours. Elena rose from her bunk, the thin mattress creaking under her as she swung her legs to the cold linoleum floor. The room she shared with 3 other women in the platoon was sparse, bunks bolted to the walls, lockers aligned like soldiers at ease, the faint scent of boot polish and damp wool lingering from the night. She dressed methodically, trousers tucked into boots, shirt buttoned to the collar, beret squared precisely. No time for mirrors. Discipline was her reflection. Outside, the parade square was already assembling under floodlights that cast long shadows across the dew-slicked gravel. The platoon formed up in the dim pre-light, breaths visible in the chill air. Sergeant Major Harlan strode the front, his pace measured, clipboard in hand. Platoon, stand easy. A subtle shift rippled through the ranks, boots parting slightly, shoulders easing, but eyes remained forward. Today was the endurance phase, a 10-mile tab with full Bergens, followed by hand-to-hand in the gym. Harlan's brief was curt, his voice gravel over steel. This isn't a stroll. It's the edge of what you can carry. Fall behind. Can't you carry it alone? Elena hefted her pack, the straps biting into her shoulders as she adjusted the weight. 60 pounds of sandbags, rations, and a rolled poncho that mimicked combat load. To her right, Rhys Davies muttered under his breath. Vasquez, hope you've got your running shoes on. Wouldn't want the Queen to lag. The words were light, but they landed like a poorly aimed round, drawing a snort from Finn Riley 2 positions back. Eleanor kept her gaze locked on Harlan, jaw set. She wouldn't give them the satisfaction of a retort. Words were ammunition best saved. The whistle blew, and they moved out in column, boots thudding in unison as they hit the perimeter trail. The path wound through Aldershot's wooded fringes, gravel giving way to packed earth that sucked at their souls. Fog clung to the underbrush, muting the world to greys and greens, the only sounds their regulated breathing and the occasional clink of gear. Elena settled into a rhythm, left, right, swing the arms, pushing through the burn in her quads. She'd logged extra miles alone, mapping the route in her mind during off hours, but the pack amplified every step, a constant reminder of the body's limits. Halfway in, the pace strung out. Reese pulled ahead with Finn, their banter carrying back like stray radio chatter. "Oi, Davies, reckon she'll make it without a breather? Or will we have to princess carry her?" Finn's laugh echoed off the trees, sharp and unchecked. A few others joined in, the sound fracturing the column's harmony. Elena felt the heat rise again, not from exertion but from the deliberate jab. She was matching stride for stride, her Bergen no lighter, yet the taunts painted her as fragile, an outsider in fatigues. Harlan, bringing up the rear in a Land Rover, idled alongside the stragglers, his megaphone crackling. "Tighten it up. This is a unit, not a social." But he didn't call out the talk. In the ranks, such barbs were often dismissed as morale builders, the rough edges of brotherhood. Elena pressed on, sweat tracing cold paths down her back, the mist beading on her lashes. By mile 8, her calves screamed, but she overtook a faltering private, offering a clipped steady on without breaking stride. It wasn't showmanship. It was the pact she believed in. Lift the line, no matter the cost. They staggered back to base at 800, the square a sea of heaving chests and dropped packs. Harlan circled them, eyes scanning for weakness. "Debrief in 5. Hydrate, but no slacking." Elena peeled off her Bergen, arms trembling as she stretched, the relief immediate but fleeting. In the gym annex, they transitioned to combatives. Padded mats unrolled across the concrete, the air thick with the tang of sweat and liniment. The instructor, a squat staff sergeant named Kowalski with scarred knuckles from his boxing days, demonstrated the basics: joint locks, strikes, ground control. This is survival. No rules beyond the tap-out. Pairing off, Eleanor drew Reese as her partner. He grinned, circling her on the mat, gloves up. "Easy now, Queen, don't want to bruise the royal hands." The platoon ringed the edges, some leaning against the walls, others stretching. Finn watched from his pair, arms crossed. They engaged. Reese lunged with a jab, testing her guard. Eleanor parried, countering with a low kick to his thigh that connected solidly, the thud echoing. He winced, but pressed, grappling for a clinch. She twisted free, using his momentum to sweep his leg, dropping him to the mat with a controlled thud. "Tap?" she asked, knee light on his chest, voice even. Reese slapped the mat twice, sitting up with a rub to his elbow. "Fair play, Vasquez." But the murmurs started, Finn's voice cutting through. "Lucky shot. Try that on a real scrap, love." The room tensed, a few nods rippling. Kowalski blew his whistle. "Focus, next rotation." Elena rotated to Finn, the air between them charged like static before a storm. He was broader, his stance aggressive from the start. "Come on then," he said, beckoning. She moved in, measured, feinting high before dropping low, a takedown aimed at his hips. He anticipated, powering through to pin her arm, twisting her wrist in a lock that bordered on excessive. Pain flared white-hot, but she rolled with it, bridging her hips to escape. They scrambled, breaths ragged, until she locked his arm in a figure 4, applying pressure just short of injury. "Tap! Riley!" Kowalski called from the side, intervening. Finn released, face flushed, eyes narrowed. "Slippery one, aren't you?" he muttered as they reset. The session dragged, each pair drilling until muscles quivered. By noon, bruises bloomed under uniforms, the gym a haze of exertion. Harlan observed from the door, arms folded, his silence approval or judgment, impossible to tell. Lunch was subdued, the mess hall quieter than usual. Eleanor sat alone at first, nursing a bruised wrist with an ice pack, the cold seeping through her skin. Reese slid in across from her unprompted. "Solid work in there, Elena. Didn't mean the jabs earlier." She met his eyes, seeing the olive branch for what it was, genuine if late. "Appreciate it, Davies. Just doing the job." But Finn lingered at the serving line, tray in hand, his gaze lingering too long. The mockery wasn't isolated. It was a thread woven into the platoon's fabric, testing her resolve like the miles on the trail. As they filed out for afternoon briefings, tactics on urban breach, maps unrolled on trestle tables, Eleanor felt the fracture deepen. Harlan's voice droned on urban threats, the hum of fluorescent lights underscoring his points, but her mind replayed the mat, the tap-out, the unspoken challenge. By evening stand-down, as the platoon dispersed to polish boots and mend gear, Eleanor walked the kennel perimeter alone. The K9 units were housed there, handlers walking their dogs on leads, the animals' noses twitching at the wind. One shepherd, a black and tan named Rex, paused near the fence, ears perked as if sensing her turmoil. His handler, a quiet corporal from the military working dogs, nodded. "They know when something's off," he said simply. Elena nodded back, the encounter a brief anchor. The base lights flickered on, casting pools of yellow across the paths. Tomorrow loomed with selection rumors solidifying, whispers of the SAS aptitude phase kicking off in 2 weeks. The taunts would escalate, she knew, but so would her preparation. In the rigid world of ranks and routines, defiance wasn't a shout. It was the steady footfall, the unyielding grip, carrying her toward a reckoning that would redefine them all. The third week of intensified drills dawned with a relentless drizzle that turned the Aldershot paths into slick ribbons of mud. Elena Vasquez reported to the platoon hut at 400 hours, the fluorescent strips buzzing to life as she claimed her spot at the folding table. Maps of the Brecon beacons lay spread before her, annotated with pencil marks, routes for the upcoming selection phase, elevation profiles she'd memorized like rifle serials. The air carried the sharp scent of fresh coffee from the urn, mingling with the musty dampness seeping through the corrugated roof. Her section mates trickled in, shaking off rain from their cagules, the low murmur of voices building like distant thunder. Sergeant Major Harlan entered last, his boots leaving precise imprints on the linoleum. He placed a stack of briefing packets on the table with a deliberate thud. Aptitude phase intel. SAS selection starts in 10 days. Volunteers only, those with the spine for it. His eyes swept the room, lingering on no one, but Elena felt the weight settle on her shoulders. The SAS was the pinnacle, a crucible where paratroopers shed their airborne skin for something sharper, more shadowed. Whispers had circulated for weeks, endurance marches in the hills, resistance to interrogation, the unspoken cull that left half the candidates broken by week 1. Elena raised her hand, voice steady. "Private Vasquez volunteering, Sergeant Major." The room stilled, then a ripple of chuckles broke from the back. Finn Riley's first, low and mocking. Rhys Davies shifted beside him, elbowing lightly, but his grin held an edge. Harlan nodded curtly. "Noted. Pack for Hills, Bergen's at 80 pounds, no comforts. Dismissed at 600 for final PT." As the hut emptied, Finn lingered, tray of maps in hand. "Vasquez, you serious? Those hills will eat you alive. Stick to base duties, yeah? We don't need rescuing up there." His tone was casual, but the words landed like a poorly secured clip, heavy with implication. Elena met his gaze, folding her notes with care. "I'll manage, Corporal. Worry about your own pace." Rhys clapped Finn on the back, steering him out. "Leave her be, mate. Queen's got dreams." The morning PT was a gauntlet. Circuits around the obstacle course, rain lashing their faces as they scaled walls slick with algae. Elena's gloves shredded on the rope climb, fibers biting into her palms, but she crested the top without pause, dropping to the mud below with a controlled roll. Harlan timed them from the sidelines, stopwatch clicking like a metronome. Vasquez, 28 seconds, acceptable. Praise was rare. It fueled her like dry rations. By midday, the platoon converged on the assault course for team relays, leapfrogging logs, crawling under wire in the muck. Elena's team drew the lead slot, her at point with Rhys and a quiet lance corporal named Patel. They moved as one. Signals clipped, "Move, cover." But as they hit the tunnel crawl, Finn's team, lagging deliberately, shouted from behind, "Faster, Queen! Don't want to keep the lads waiting for your tea break!" Laughter echoed off the wet earth, Patel glancing back uncomfortably. Elena pushed through the narrow pipe, shoulders scraping concrete, emerging coated in filth, but first across the line. Harlan's debrief was in the dripping overhang of the equipment shed, the platoon huddled shoulder to shoulder. "Riley's team, last by 3 minutes. Explain." Finn wiped mud from his brow, stance relaxed. "Slipped on the wire, Sarge. Ground's a bog." Harlan's eyes narrowed. "Slips happen. Distractions don't. Focus on the mission, not the mouth." The warning hung, but Finn's shrug dismissed it, eyes flicking to Elena with a smirk. Afternoon brought weapons familiarization in the armory, the tang of gun oil thick in the confined space. Elena stripped her SA-80 down to components, reassembling blindfolded as per the drill, fingers finding pins and springs by memory alone. The instructor, a grizzled warrant officer, nodded approval. "Clean work, Private. SAS'll test that under fire." But as she removed the blindfold, Finn leaned against a rack nearby, rifle in hand. "Blindfolded? Cute. Bet you can't do it with one hand tied, love, like the rest of selection." The armory fell quiet, tools clinking to a halt. Reese paused mid-wipe, cloth hovering. Elena set her weapon down, chamber clear, and turned. "Care to test it, Corporal?" Her voice was level, no challenge in the tone. But the room tensed. Finn's grin faltered, then widened. "All right then. Loser buys the section's next round in the mess." The warrant officer cleared his throat. "This ain't a game. Back to work." But the gauntlet was thrown. After stand-down, as the platoon dispersed to the wet concrete paths, a knot formed near the gym annex. Finn, Reese, Patel, and a half-dozen others, including 2 from the neighboring section. Word had spread, an impromptu spar, no pads, just to settle the Queen talk. Elena approached, rain dripping from her beret, the group parting slightly. Harlan wasn't present. This was off books, the kind of ritual that bound or broke units in the shadows of routine. Finn stepped forward first, circling on the damp grass verge. "No holds barred. Vasquez, show us." She nodded, stance low, breaths measured in the downpour. He came in aggressive, a haymaker swing she ducked, countering with a sharp elbow to his ribs, controlled but solid. He grunted, pressing with a clinch, but she broke free, sweeping his ankle to drop him into a puddle. "Yield?" she asked, boot light on his shoulder. Finn tapped the ground, sitting up soaked. "One down." Reese next, more measured, his wiry frame testing grapples. Elena parried, using leverage to flip him over her hip, the thud muffled by mud. He tapped quick, respect in his eyes. "Fair." Patel hesitated, then engaged lightly. She pinned him in seconds, gentle release. Word rippled, 4 more stepped up, each a veteran of the platoon, their challenges laced with the earlier barbs. Elena moved through them methodically, blocks, throws, submissions born of endless drills. The rain hammered down, spectators' faces blurred, but cheers mixed with mutters now, the mockery fracturing under her precision. By the 9th, a burly private from logistics borrowed for the spectacle. Elena's arms burned, breaths ragged, but she locked his arm in a hold that forced the tap. He rose, rubbing his shoulder, nodding silent. The group fell quiet, Finn at the edge, arms crossed. 9 down. Happy now. No triumph in her voice, just fatigue. Not about happy, Corporal, about ready. Reese broke the silence, clapping slowly. "Bloody hell, Vasquez, you're in." As they dispersed, the base lights reflecting off puddles like scattered medals, Harlan emerged from the shadows of the barracks, unseen until then. His presence stilled the stragglers. "Heard enough. Private, report to my office at 700. We've got selections to prep." Elena saluted, water streaming down her face, the weight of the moment settling. Not victory, but validation. The mockery had cracked open something deeper, a test of the unit's core, where loyalty demanded more than endurance. In the rigid cadence of military life, her stand rippled outward, a quiet signal that conscience in fatigues could bend the chain without breaking it. "Comment where you're watching from." I want to know how far stories of courage and integrity can reach. The morning after the rain-soaked spar, Aldershot base stirred under a tentative sun that pierced the thinning clouds like a signal flare. At 700 hours sharp, Elena Vasquez stood outside Sergeant Major Harlan's office door, her uniform pressed and boots polished to a mirror sheen despite the night's mud. The corridor smelled of fresh varnish and stale coffee from the adjacent orderly room, the low hum of a radiator underscoring the quiet. She knocked twice, crisp, authoritative, before entering at his barked "Come." Harlan sat behind a scarred oak desk, piled with personnel files and a half-empty mug, his campaign photo from the Falklands gazing down from the wall. He gestured to the chair opposite, eyes appraising her without warmth or judgment. "Private Vasquez, last night's entertainment. Care to walk me through it?" His tone was neutral, a debrief stripped to essentials, no room for excuses. Eleanor sat straight-backed, hands folded in her lap. "Informal combatives, Sergeant Major. Section mates testing readiness for selection. I engaged 9 in sequence. No injuries reported." She recounted the details methodically, the rain-slick grass, the measured holds, the taps, omitting the barbs that had ignited it. Harlan leaned back, fingers steepled, the chair creaking under his bulk. "Heard the chatter. Queen business again. You put them down clean?" "Yes, sir. Controlled. No escalation." Her voice held steady, but the memory lingered. Finn's grudging nod, Reese's quiet respect, the shift in the air as the platoon watched. Harlan nodded once, flipping open a folder. Her service record, evaluations crisp and annotated. SAS aptitude in 8 days. Brecon's no joke. 40-mile tabs in the dark, no sleep. Instructors who'll break you for breakfast. You volunteer knowing that? Affirmative. The words were simple, but they carried the weight of nights spent running hills alone, muscles screaming against the doubt sown by her mates. Harlan's gaze softened fractionally, a rare crack in the facade. "Good. But this unit, it's a machine. Gears grind. Sometimes they snag on egos. That spar, it fixed nothing permanent. Riley's got a chip. Davies is wavering. You lead by example, not spectacle." She absorbed it, the advice landing like a rucksack adjustment. Practical, unyielding. "Understood, Sergeant Major." He dismissed her with a nod, but as she rose, added, "Gear up for today's brief. And Vasquez, keep your head down. Selection chews up the proud." The platoon assembled in the briefing hut by 0900, the air thick with the scent of damp wool from drying kit. Folding chairs scraped against concrete as they filed in, Reese and Finn taking seats at the back, their usual smirks subdued. Elena claimed a spot midway, notebook at ready, the faint bruise on her wrist hidden under her sleeve. Harlan entered with the company commander, a major with a clipped mustache and eyes like range-finders. The screen flickered to life, slides of Welsh terrain, jagged peaks under relentless skies. "Selection overview," the major began, pointer tapping the map. "Phase 1, endurance. Navigation in zero viz, Bergen's at 90 pounds. Fail the tab, you're out, no appeals." His voice was measured, the slides advancing with clicks that echoed the gravity. Elena traced the routes mentally, her pencil marking contingencies, water points, bailout ridges. Whispers stirred at the rear, Finn muttering to Reese, "Bet the Queen's packing heels for the hills." Harlan's head snapped around. "Riley, front and center." Finn rose, face neutral, traversing the aisle to stand at attention. The major paused, eyebrow arched. "Problem, Corporal?" Finn's reply was clipped. "Negative, sir. Just clarifying load specs." But the room felt it, the undercurrent, the unresolved friction from the night before. Harlan stepped in. "Clarify on your time, sit." The brief dragged into tactics, resistance drills, simulated captures where candidates endured stress positions, and verbal probes. Elena noted the psych evals, resilience under isolation, the mental grind as brutal as the physical. By noon, as they broke for the range, the platoon moved in loose formation, the gravel path crunching underfoot. Reese fell in beside her, voice low. "That was bold last night, Elena. Finn stewing, but respect from me anyway." She nodded, rifle slung over her shoulder, the weight familiar. Not about bold, Davies. About prepping. We're a team. He grunted agreement, but Finn's glare from ahead spoke volumes, his pace deliberate as if marking distance. The afternoon range was live-fire quals on the long meadow, targets at 300 meters under a wind that whipped the grass. Elena prone out, bipod steady, the earth cool against her elbows. Crack. Her rounds grouped tight, brass ejecting in rhythmic arcs. Harlan logged scores from the berm, calling Vasquez 98%, selection standard. Finn's turn faltered, a flyer at 250, earning a curt redo from the range officer. As they packed up, he slung his SA-80 with force, muttering within earshot. Must be nice getting the easy lane. The mess at 1800 was stew and hard bread, the hall's fluorescent glare casting harsh shadows. Elena sat with Patel, who slid her a mug of tea. Strong, no sugar. Heard Harlan's backing you for selection, he said quietly, stirring his own. First woman's shot from our lot in years. She sipped, the heat grounding her. Not first, just next. But across the room, Finn held court with a knot of privates, his gestures animated, the queen jabs resurfacing in hushed tones that carried like smoke. Stand down brought no respite. Elena hit the gym solo, the clang of weights her meditation. Pull-ups until her lats burned, squats heavy with plates that mirrored the Bergen load. Sweat traced the mat's seams, her breaths measured exhales in the empty space. Reese appeared in the doorway, towel over shoulder. Mine company. She waved him in, spotting his bench press. 3 sets, grunts of effort. Between reps, he broached it. Finn's pushing for his own selection. Thinks last night was a fluke, but I saw it. Your form's SAS grade. Fluke or not, we all grind, she replied, racking a barbell. The conversation turned to Brecon. The fan dance route, the tabs cut-off times. For the first time it felt like alliance, not obligation, the bond of shared ambition forging in the quiet hours. By 2200, barracks lights dimmed, the platoon settling into bunks with the rustle of sleeping bags. Eleanor lay awake, staring at the ceiling cracks, the day's tensions coiling like a spring. Harlan's words echoed, the machine's gears. Her stand had shifted them, but not smoothed. Finn's resentment simmered, a potential fracture in the chain. Tomorrow's drills would press harder, night-nav exercise, the dark amplifying doubts. Selection loomed not just a personal test, but a mirror for the unit's soul, where mockery met merit, and loyalty demanded proof beyond words. Outside, the wind sighed through the wire, carrying the distant bark of a K9 on patrol. Elena closed her eyes, resolve settling like dew. In the hierarchy's unyielding march, one defiant step could realign the ranks, but only if conscience held the line. The night deepened, base silent save for the watch's footfalls, the promise of reckoning etched in the stars above. The 4th day before selection arrived, with a biting nor'wester that scoured the Aldershot ranges, whipping dust into veils that stung the eyes like fine grit. Elena Vasquez mustered with the volunteer cadre at 500 hours, a dozen paratroopers from across the battalion, their silhouettes stark against the sodium lamps flickering off one by one. She stood at the rear of the formation, Bergen already packed at 85 pounds. Sand, water bladders, a compass etched with her initials from basic. The air hummed with the low growl of generators powering the briefing marquee, the scent of aviation fuel drifting from the distant airstrip where Chinooks idled for potential extractions. Sergeant Major Harlan oversaw the final shakedown, his flashlight beam sweeping gear like a searchlight. This is your last dry run. Brecon starts tomorrow. No medevacs for blisters or egos. Navigation by stars and map alone. Get lost, and you're RTU'd before breakfast. His voice cut through the wind, steady as a rifle bolt. Elena adjusted her straps, the weight compressing her spine, a familiar ache that sharpened focus. Among the cadre, Rhys Davies stood 2 ranks ahead, his nod subtle when their eyes met. No words, just acknowledgement. Finn Riley wasn't volunteering. He'd bowed out the day prior, citing a pulled hamstring in the medbay log, though whispers pegged it as sour grapes from the spar. The cadre double-timed to the perimeter trail for the night nav exercise, a 20-mile loop simulating Brecon's contours with elevation spikes and false summits. Instructors from the selection cadre, Hard men with SAS wings pinned discreetly, issued coordinates scribbled on damp paper. Grid refs, checkpoints marked by chem lights buried in the undergrowth. Move out solo, no buddy system. Dawn return or bust, one growled, his face shadowed under a boonie hat. Elena pocketed her plot, orienting the map by the dipper's arc, the wind tugging at corners like insistent fingers. She struck out alone, boots sinking into the sodden turf as the trail climbed toward the wooded ridgeline. The beam from her red lens headlamp bobbed minimally, conserving night vision, the world reduced to contours and shadows. Branches clawed at her sleeves, releasing the earthy tang of wet pine, while her breath formed rhythmic clouds in the cold. At the first checkpoint, mile 5, a foxhole dug into a slope, she confirmed position by pace count. 2, 800 steps from start, elevation gain matching the topo lines. A faint chem light glowed under leaves, her fingers brushing it to log the code, Bravo 7. Doubt crept in around mile 10, the wind howling through gaps in the trees like radio static gone wild. Her Bergen shifted with each stride, straps chafing shoulders raw, but she recalibrated at a stream crossing, compass needle steady north, bearings triangulated to the next rise. Thoughts turned inward, the platoon's fractures, Finn's absence a silent victory laced with unease. Harlan's warning echoed, gears snagging on egos. Was her push for selection selfish, widening the rift or the conscience the unit needed? Loyalty wasn't blind obedience, it was proving the chain strong enough for all. Bio 300, fatigue clawed deep, legs leaden as she crested the final hill, the base lights a hazy constellation below. She hit the finish line, a marked cone on the square, at 04:30, one of 4 to return before first light. Harlan logged her time, nodding once. Vasquez, solid nav. Reese staggered in 20 minutes later, mud-caked and grinning through exhaustion. Beat the dark, eh? He rasped, collapsing beside her to unlace boots. The others filtered in over the next hour, 2 dropped for missed checkpoints, their faces ashen under the dawn's pallor. Debrief convened in the marquee as the sun crested, casting slanted rays through canvas flaps. The instructors dissected routes. Private Vasquez, efficient bearings, minimal drift, but that last leg, pushed too hard, could have conserved for the real tab. Eleanor absorbed the critique, sketching adjustments on her map, the pencil lead snapping once from the chill in her fingers. Harlan added his piece. Selection's not solo forever. Think team when the hills call. His eyes flicked to Reese, then her, a subtle bridge across the divide. Breakfast was hasty, porridge ladled from field kettles, steam rising in the crisp air. The cadre dispersed to pack transports, but Elena lingered by the vehicles, checking her Bergen one last time. Ration bars inventoried, med kit sealed. Patel approached from the platoon lines, hands in pockets against the wind. Heard you aced the nav. Finn's in the mess, spinning it like you're getting special treatment. His voice was low, laced with concern. Elena zipped a compartment, meeting his gaze. No specials, just work. Tell him that if he asks. The convoy rolled out at 800, a line of Pinsgowers rumbling toward the M3, bound for Sennybridge in Wales. Eleanor rode mid-pack. Window cracked to let in the rush of air, the engine's vibration syncing with her pulse. Reese sat opposite, sharing a silent flask of water, the gesture wordless solidarity. Conversation turned to the unknown, the fan dance's brutality, the long drag, where minds fractured before bodies. You'll make it, he said finally, capping the flask. Show 'em what the Queen's made of, properly. Brick-on welcomed them with sheets of rain slanting across the moorland, the drop-off point a wind-swept lay-by, where instructors barked final orders. Bergen's on, maps out. First tab, 26 miles, Penny Fan and back, cut off at 1800, go. Eleanor shouldered her load, now 90 pounds with added water, and oriented, the group scattering into the mist like ghosts. The path climbed steep, scree sliding under boots, the wind shrieking through her hood. Visibility dropped to yards, forcing compass reliance, each step a calculated defiance against the pull of gravity and doubt. Hours blurred, quads burning on a sense, the metallic taste of exertion in her mouth. At the summit checkpoint, An instructor in oilskins logged her number. Vasquez, 1430 hours, his nod curt amid the gale. Descent was treacherous, ankles twisting on loose rock, but she pressed, mind reciting bearings like a mantra. Whispers of the platoon echoed faintly, the mockery, the spar, the quiet shifts in respect. This wasn't just survival. It was absolution, proving conscience could endure where taunts could not. By late afternoon, the trail leveled into boggy flats, peat sucking at her soles. The rain relentless. 2 candidates passed her, spent and retching, instructors trailing like shadows. Eleanor overtook a straggler from another battalion, offering a clipped, pace steady, without pause, the pact holding even here. As the cut-off loomed, base camp's lights pierced the haze, a beacon of rigid order. She crossed the line at 1745, Bergen dropping from numb shoulders, Harlan waiting with the cadre log. First female through, he noted, voice low over the downpour. No fanfare, just the fact, rippling through the assembled like a after-action report. Reese finished minutes later, clapping her back once, soaked to the bone. In the tent that night, as they huddled over stoves heating tins of stew, the air thickened with unspoken bonds. Finn's absence loomed larger, a fracture mended by miles, but the real test awaited. Days of interrogation, isolation, the moral crucibles where duty met the soul's quiet rebellion. Elena cleaned her weapon by lamplight, the slide's click a steady rhythm, resolve forged in the Welsh wilds, loyalty not to ranks alone but to the integrity that bound them true. The second day in Brecon dawned under a leaden sky, the camp a cluster of low tents lashed against the relentless Welsh wind that rattled guy ropes like distant small arms fire. Elena Vasquez rose at 400 hours, the canvas flap whispering as she stepped into the chill, her breath fogging in the pre-dawn gloom. The ground squelched under her boots, a mosaic of mud and trampled grass from the night's rotations. Around her, the remaining cadre, 18 now whittled from 30 by the first tab, stirred in their bivouacs, faces etched with the hollows of fatigue. Her Bergen lay packed nearby, stripped to essentials, map, compass, a single ration bar untouched since yesterday. The air carried the sharp bite of peat and wet wool, undercut by the faint, acrid whiff of field latrines. Instructors from the Directorate of Special Forces prowled the perimeter, their silhouettes indistinct in the half-light, clipboards at the ready. No bugle here. Selection was a silent forge, tempering will through isolation. Elena joined the line forming at the central muster point, a weathered sergeant with a scarred cheek, barking coordinates for the morning's task. A solo navigation to a remote extraction point, 10 miles through fog-shrouded valleys with a twist. Instructors embedded as hostiles to test evasion. "Adapt or RTU," he growled, his voice gravel over the rising gale. "This is where minds crack." She oriented her map by the faint glow of a headlamp, plotting bearings with a steady hand, despite the tremor in her fingers from yesterday's exertion. Rhys Davies stood 2 positions away, his eyes meeting hers briefly. A nod, nothing more. The others were ghosts of their Aldershot selves. Patel hunched against the cold, a lance corporal from the Scots Guards nursing blistered feet. No banter. The hills had stripped that luxury. At the signal, they dispersed into the mist, boots fading into the suck of bog and heather. Elena moved low, paralleling a stream to mask noise, the water's murmur her only companion. Compass needle quivered north, each step a deliberate placement, heel-toe, minimal splash. By midday, the evasion phase ignited. A whistle pierced the fog from a ridge. Contact. Elena dropped prone behind a boulder, heart steadying to the rhythm of her breaths, the stone's damp chill seeping through her smock. Footfalls approached, 2 instructors, their voices clipped over the wind. "Vasquez, show yourself. Time for a chat." She held, counting seconds, then flanked left through bracken, thorns snagging her cuffs like accusations. The game was psychological. Pursue, probe, break the facade of resolve. She evaded for 2 miles, circling back to her plotted route, but they closed the net at a narrow defile, one grabbing her arm with a vice grip. "Got you, Private. Interrogation tent, now." No resistance. Protocol demanded compliance. They marched her to a camouflaged hooch at the valley's edge. The flap zipped tight against prying eyes. Inside, the space was claustrophobic. A folding table, 2 chairs, a single bulb swinging from a crossbeam casting jittery shadows. The lead instructor, a wiry major with eyes like flint, sat opposite, flanked by a note-taker. No uniform insignia. Anonymity was the rule. Sit. We're going to talk about why a girl like you thinks she belongs here. Eleanor's wrists were loosely bound to the chair arms, simulated capture, stress positions to follow if she stonewalled. The ropes chafed, but she kept her posture erect, gaze forward. The questions started routine. Service record, platoon dynamics, the Aldershot spar. Heard you dropped 9 lads in the mud. Impressive, or just a stunt for attention? His tone was conversational, laced with the mockery she'd fled. Queen, love, the barbs repackaged for the hills. She answered factually. Dates, maneuvers, no embellishment. Controlled engagements, sir, preparation for selection. He leaned in, the bulb's light hollowing his cheeks. Preparation? Or proving a point to the boys back home? We don't need symbols, we need operators. What's your real motive? Escape the mess hall giggles. The probe deepened, twisting into hypotheticals. Abandon a wounded mate to save the mission. Disobey a flawed order in the field. Elena's responses were measured, rooted in the chain of command, yet edged with conscience, the oath to protect, not just obey. Sweat beaded under her collar, the ropes tightening as they shifted her to a kneeling hold, knees grinding into the packed earth floor. Hours blurred, verbal jabs about her gender, her soft platoon, the impossibility of a woman in the regiment. Try not to cry, Queen, but the major echoed Finn's taunt, voice low, testing fractures. Elena's jaw clenched, the words a spark against dry tinder, but she held, eyes dry, voice even. No tears, sir. Just duty. The session broke at dusk, ropes cut, her shoulders numb from the strain. Released to the perimeter, she stumbled to her tent, the cadre's distant murmurs a low hum. Reese found her there, sharing a canteen of water under the flap's shelter. Heard the echoes. You all right? His concern was genuine, the Welsh accent softened by fatigue. Intact, she replied, flexing her wrists, red welts rising like badges. They spoke in fragments, the evasion routes, the mind games designed to expose weakness. They're digging for loyalty, Reese said, staring into the gathering dark, not just to the crown, but to self. Your spar back home? That's what got their notice, conscience over convenience. Elena nodded, the validation settling like a secured load. Finn's shadow loomed in memory, his resentment a foil to this crucible, where mockery met merit head-on. Night brought isolation, solo vigil in a shallow scrape, no fire, the wind keening through the tors like unanswered radio calls. Elena lay still, map folded under her cheek, replaying the interrogation, the moral tightrope of orders versus justice, the cost of integrity in silence. By dawn, the cadre reassembled, 2 more withdrawn for cracking under the probes. Harlan, overseeing from the command tent, caught her eye during muster. A subtle salute, acknowledgement of endurance. The next phase loomed, team tasks in the dark, where individual stands forged unit legacy. As the instructors issued orders for the evening's resistance drill, Elena shouldered her Bergen, the weight lighter now, borne by resolve. The mockery had followed her to Brecon, but here, in the regiment's unforgiving heart, it transmuted, from fracture to fuel, her defiance a quiet ripple through the ranks. Loyalty demanded more than survival. It required the courage to redefine the chain, one unyielding step at a time. If this story already has your respect, hit the like button. It helps the story of Elena Vasquez reach those who still believe in honor. The final phase of SAS selection unfolded under a moonless sky. The Brecon beacons reduced to a labyrinth of ink-black ridges and whispering gales that clawed at the cadre's windproofs like unseen adversaries. Elena Vasquez crouched at the edge of the muster point, her face smeared with camouflage cream that itched faintly against the chill. The metallic tang of zinc mingling with the peat-scented dampness rising from the moor. It was 2200 hours. The remaining 12 candidates, whittled further by the day's evasions, huddled in a loose semicircle around the lead instructor, a broad-shouldered captain whose voice carried low and precise over the wind's howl. No lights. Night vision goggles were stowed, forcing reliance on memory and the faint star pricks filtering through scudding clouds. "This is the hinge," the captain said, his breath visible in the cold. "Team task: infiltrate a simulated enemy patrol base, extract a high-value asset, exfil under fire. Roles assigned, no volunteers. Fail as a unit, all RTU." He distributed folded orders by touch alone, the paper crinkling softly in gloved hands. Eleanor's packet named her point for the extraction team, Rhys Davies on Overwatch, Patel as the asset handler, and 2 others from the Royal Marines for support. No mention of Finn. His absence from selection was a ghost in the briefing, a reminder of fractures left behind in Aldershot. The objective grid ref was etched in her mind, a 1.5-mile trek over broken ground, navigating by dead reckoning and whispered pace counts. They moved out in silence, a file of shadows slipping from the camp's fringe into the enveloping dark. Elena led, boots probing the uneven turf, each step measured to avoid the sucking bogs that could betray position with a splash. The wind masked their footfalls, but it also distorted sounds. Distant sheep bleats mimicking human calls, the rustle of heather like patrol rustles. At the halfway mark, they paused in a shallow depression, Eleanor signaling halt with a hand squeezed down the line. "Bearing 270, 800 paces to ridge," she murmured to Rhys, her voice a thread in the void. He nodded, adjusting his sling. The faint click of his weapon safety the only reply. The patrol base loomed as a cluster of dim chem lights, mimicking guard posts, instructors role-playing sentries with suppressed air rifles for simunition. Elena's team flanked low, using a dry streambed for cover, the pebbles shifting under knees like loose gravel on a live op. She spotted the asset, a dummy rigged with a transponder, guarded by 2 hostiles. "Signal infiltrate." Rhys peeled off for Overwatch, his silhouette vanishing into the rocks above. Eleanor crawled forward, elbows digging into cold earth, the scent of wet stone filling her nostrils. Patel mirrored her, breath steady despite the strain. Contact came swift. A twig snap under Patel's boot drew a challenge. "Halt! Identify!" An instructor's voice, edged with the drill's intensity. Eleanor froze, then countered with a faint whisper, friendly, extracting VIP. But the game escalated. Simunition cracked from the shadows, yellow bursts painting the night. She rolled left, suppressing with controlled bursts. Pop, pop, the acrid whiff of paint rounds cutting the air. Rhys's fire pinned the left flank, his rounds stitching the ground near the guard's feet. "Moving!" Elena called, low and clipped, dashing to the asset while Patel covered. They secured the dummy in a fireman's carry, Patel grunting under the weight as they exfiltrated, the teams bounding Overwatch a seamless rhythm. Move, cover, move. A final hostile pursued, forcing a hasty ambush, Elena dropping prone behind a boulder, her shots dropping the instructor with a clean hit to the chest plate. "Clear," she signaled, the word rippling relief through the line. They hit the exfil point at 0200, the captain logging the success with a curt nod under his NVGs. "Team intact. Debrief at first light." Dawn broke grey and unforgiving. The cadre assembled in the command tent as mist rolled off the peaks like battlefield smoke. The captain paced, dissecting the task. Vasquez's point led clean infill. Evasion solid. Fire discipline textbook. Davies' Overwatch suppressed without overkill. Unit cohesion held. No praise lavished. Facts stacked like after-action slides. But Harlan, observing from the rear, met her eyes. A subtle incline of the head. Acknowledgement earned in the dark. 2 more candidates were withdrawn that morning. One for a botched signal, another for freezing under simulated pressure. Elena, Rhys and Patel advanced. The trio acquired core amid the cull. Word filtered back to Aldershot via secure line by midday, the battalion's ops room buzzing with the relay. Finn Riley, confined to base duties with his feigned injury exposed in the medlogs, paced the platoon hut, the concrete floor echoing his boots. The mockery that had fueled his resentment now soured in his mouth. Reports of Elena's leadership in Brecon, taking point, forging the team through the night, rippled through the ranks like a command brief. Reese's family had called the mess, sharing snippets. Her steady voice in the chaos, the unyielding grip on the mission. "She's not just in," a veteran sergeant muttered over tea. "She's redefining it." Back in Wales, the final interviews convened in a stark Nissen hut, the air heavy with the hum of a diesel heater and the faint ozone of electronics. Elena sat before the selection board. 3 officers, faces impassive under the harsh fluorescence. Her uniform still caked with hill grime. "Private Vasquez," the chairman began, a colonel with a chest full of ribbons. "Your record shows initiative, the Aldershot incident, the tabs, last night's task. But explain the defiance, the spar, the push against platoon norms." She met his gaze, hands flat on her knees. The welts from interrogation faded but felt. "Defiance born of duty, sir. Mockery erodes the chain. I proved merit over doubt. Not for show, but to strengthen the unit. Show that loyalty includes calling out weakness, male or female." Her words were precise, no plea, just the truth honed in the hills. The board nodded, the silence stretching like a held breath. "Continuation recommended. Report to Hereford for continuation training." The return convoy wound south under clearing skies, Elena riding shotgun in the lead Pinzgauer, the Welsh peaks receding like conquered ground. Reese sat behind, sharing a ration bar in silence, the gesture sealing their bond. At Aldershot, the platoon mustered on the square at 1600, Harlan at the front, the air crisp with autumn's edge. Finn stood in the ranks, face drawn. As the announcement dropped, Private Vasquez selected for SAS continuation, first from this battalion in 5 years. Her leadership in Brecon sets the standard, team over ego, merit over noise. Murmurs swept the formation, eyes turning to Elena as she stood front and center, beret squared, no smile breaking the discipline. Finn's gaze met hers briefly, resentment cracked, replaced by a grudging salute when Harlan ordered parade rest. Post-muster, the platoon lingered, Reese clapping her shoulder first. "Led us through the dark, Queen. Proper." Others followed. Patel's quiet, well-earned. Even Finn approaching last, voice low. "Didn't see it coming. Respect, Vasquez. Owe you a round." No apology spelled out. In the ranks, actions bridged the gaps words couldn't. Harlan pulled her aside in his office that evening, the door clicking shut on the base's hum. "Your stand sparked it. Reform in the making. Battalions mandating sensitivity briefs, mixed team drills. You're mentoring the next volunteers, starting with Riley if he mans up." Elena nodded, the weight of legacy settling. Not a medal, but a shift in the machine's gears. Conscience woven into the chain. Weeks blurred into continuation at Hereford. Jungle phases, urban ops, the forge refining her further. But Aldershot's ripple endured, platoon cohesion tightened, mockery yielding to mutual grind, Elena's name invoked in briefings as the measure of resolve. She became the symbol, a private who bent the hierarchy not with rebellion, but integrity, proving that in rigid systems, moral courage could realign the ranks for all. Subscribe for more stories of loyalty, courage, and justice within the ranks. Thank you for watching the case of Try Not to Cry, Queen. See you in the next one. In the quiet cadence of a changing guard, one soldier's unyielding step echoed through the institution, forging loyalty from the fires of doubt.